The story of the Ethics Centre in some ways is pretty simple. All under one roof, you've got people dealing with everything from preparing soldiers to go to war and deal with asymmetric warfare against people like ISIS and the Taliban, and then end-of-life decisions involving babies born with genetic defects or elderly people, where you've got to decide whether you're prolonging life or just making someone you love die slowly. And in between, we deal with issues to do with sport, business, government. We're not a moral policeman. We help to uncover the truth, to look at the DNA that gives rise to culture in organisations, and for our whole society, hopefully help to address the failure of the ethical infrastructure which has taken place over a decade or so. There's nothing else like it in the world. When you survey all the different things which I've seen over my time here, there are a few things that are starting to become clear. Firstly, in the corporate space, the attempt to try and manage risk by regulation and surveillance through compliance, it hasn't worked. In fact, it was never going to work, but it seemed to provide a panacea. So people are starting to wake up to the importance of the underlying culture. And beneath all culture, there's the stuff of ethics, purpose, values and principles. And from that, cultures grow. There's also a changing set of expectations now for corporations around notions of responsibility. People in senior executive roles and on boards are being required to be responsible even when they're not culpable. So they may not have personally done anything which is blameworthy, but nonetheless, people say, you still volunteered to be a CEO or a senior executive or a company director, and therefore when you volunteered, you must have understood that you were going to be held responsible. But there's this moment in the Second World War when Singapore had fallen and Sir Winston Churchill went to the House of Commons and he said, I did not know, I was not told, I should have asked. And people are now saying, if you're in leadership, you should have asked. Nearly all of these things that you see going wrong are produced not by people who deliberately intend to cause harm, but by those who preside over a system or a structure where people just don't think. Why did you do it? That's just the way we always did it. That's the enemy of ethics, and it's the thing that produces the greatest wrongs. A lifetime of good can be undone in a second by a bad decision. Don't accept a role in an organisation where it requires you to be two different people. And don't recruit people who you're going to require to be something other than what they are. It's not to say that everybody has to be a clone, but find a place to work which has a purpose, values and principles that are close enough to your own so that you can relate. Now, there will still be times when you have to make difficult decisions, but if you're doing it within a context in which your own ethics are more or less aligned, then you can live with that. Look, if you're in financial services and you're trying to balance a range of stakeholder interests and make good decisions for all, the only way you can really do it is to go back to the core, purpose, values, principles, and apply them consistently across all stakeholders. There's no point treating customers well if you don't treat your own staff well. There's no point treating your staff well if you're not doing it for your suppliers, because people see the whole picture. The only way you can solve this is to take that core and consistently apply it. For individuals who do this, they get a sense of coherence in their own life. They have a sense of integrity. They know they've treated people in a way which is consistent. But they also get the tangible benefits that everybody looks at them and says, actually, what they say and what they do lines up right across the spectrum. So you get a sense of confidence then that what you're doing will be appreciated for what it is. Look, if some people ask, what's the first rule of leadership? I'd say moral courage. So I look for that sense of integrity, what others might call authenticity. And if you speak the truth, you won't be alone. If you're inside an organisation and you're asking yourself, should I take something up the chain? You might have seen some ethical issue or the difference between what the organisation says and what it does. I'd encourage you to do it. I mean, hopefully you're in an organisation where people reward this, because that's what you want. You want people to be rewarded for saying we say this but we do that, because that's an incongruity. These days one of the hardest things to do is to create a culture of principled disagreement where people can debate. I mean, social media, so many things are trying to drive people into pre-configured points of view without ever discussing anything. One of the best things leaders can do to create a culture of healthy debate is to open themselves to disagreement, to invite issues being debated in their presence where theirs is just one voice amongst many. The best way to lift the capability of people leaders for ethical decision making is to give them a chance to practice. Put them on the equivalent of the ethical sked pad. Give them the tools they need, the purpose, values and principles, a decision-making framework, and let them practice. Listening skills have to be developed, the capacity to reframe things. If you do that within a culture, within an organisation, particularly if you invite people not just to think about business problems but the world in which they exist, they will very readily respond to that and begin to realise that this is the kind of people they are in this place, whether it's a home or a workplace, that considers issues and discusses them. The process of cultural change for boards, it's not a quick fix. It's years of work. And you've just got to believe that you're serving the interests of the organisation. I mean, a modern corporation is in principle immortal, and your job on a board as its mind and in some senses its soul is to help it during that period where you are there exercising stewardship over its future. So don't give up on it. Don't go short term. Look at what you're going to build for the longer term for the sake of that organisation. You give it life. You let it realise its purpose. And you live a legacy by doing so. When you take on a leadership role, no matter how terrifying it is, I'd be hopeful. I think the world does make sense. You just have to take the time to interrogate it. I think you've got to go back to your own core, find that solid place from which you move, rest on it. Don't strive, but rest for a moment. And I think when you do that, you'll often find that stillness that you have is the thing that gets you through the most challenging moments.